Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's 6 o'clock here. I know it's the dinner hour, so thanks for hanging out with me during the dinner hour. I am Kelley Molavi. I'm the Vice President of Operations for the Tennessee Center for Performance Excellence. We are a state program that sits underneath the larger Baldrige program. If you were here for our first presentation, you got an opportunity to hear from Heather Schock, who is our president and CEO. And actually, the discussion she had on data actually very much filters into what we'll be talking about today, related to the A3 and how we go about building process improvement into our daily work. So I've been a supporter and member of ASQ for a number of years. I have my ASQ auditor certification, as well as my Six Sigma Black Belt. So as Heather mentioned earlier, you are absolutely my people. So I've enjoyed getting some time with you guys. I know several of you from my TNCPE work, so it's great to see all of you. Tonight, I am going to be talking about how to use the A3 methodology for quick and effective process improvements. So as Heather mentioned, we do have a big Q and a small Q for those of you who've been around the quality world for a while. So while I do work in my day-to-day operations in the big Q using the Baldrige framework, I have a deep love and a first love of little Q tools like the A3. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, a very practical approach to using a process improvement methodology. Since I have such a deep love for the big Q stuff as well, I did want to talk a little bit to get us started on how the A3 methodology actually fits into a larger big Q framework. So again, since I'm deeply embedded into the Baldrige criteria for performance excellence, I'm going to show you how a tool like this sits within the big Q using Baldrige. So within Baldrige, for those of you who are not familiar with the Baldrige framework for performance excellence, there's actually a criteria, and the criteria are a number of really good questions that an organization should be asking themselves on who they are and how they go about doing their work. One of the questions that you'll find within the Baldrige framework is process improvement, and how do you improve your key work processes and support processes to improve both your products and or services. And we're looking for process performance here. So anything that's not meeting process performance and meeting two requirements, typically our customer requirements, we're going to talk about how we go about improving those processes. And A3 is one of my favorite tools that I have used in a number of organizations in which I've implemented process improvement. So let's dig into A3 and how it's actually used. So A3 is a problem-solving tool that's rooted in the PDCA cycle, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. It's designed to get to the root of a problem and identify ways to fix it. So it's a single visual report of what the problem is, what the solutions are, and the outcome of the project. This is actually really very important as we are doing process improvement for processes that the folks don't necessarily know how to do process improvement. So those of us who are in the quality world, process improvement might come very naturally to us, but that's not true of everyone. And so when we are thinking about giving a tool that's very quick to being understood, as well as quick to relay information to our executive leaders who really should be championing these process improvements. A3 is a great tool to do that because it is a one pager that allows everyone to contribute to and see very quickly what's been going on within the project. So it is one of the tools that you will find under the broader concept of lean. I find, however, that using the A3 methodology is, and kind of marrying it to the traditional lean concepts and using an idea of building an A3 within a Kaizen event, which is that kind of short burst event, gives the organization a lot of faith in the process improvement tools that can be used in our world that is very fast paced. Things are changing rapidly. Sometimes a larger Six Sigma green belt or black belt program that can last anywhere from kind of 6 to 12 to 18 months, we find that it's a little too long to get to the conclusions of where we need to be. The world has changed faster than we could get to the problem and the solution for the problem. So A3 is a great way of getting there. Now, A3 is typically used in some of our low-hanging fruit items, but it can also be used to design a process quickly and to stand one up. But it's typically best used for a process that is well established, that we have good data for. And so where Heather earlier was talking about having strong data, an A3 event is going to be predicated on having some good data. Now, that's not to say that I have not used the A3 methodology in which to build data. That is a way of actually getting to the appropriate data the organization needs. But if you're going to get started and never used an A3 before, I definitely recommend starting with a process that has good data. So A3 is an organizational mindset. It's structured thinking. It's repeatable thinking. So these are things that you can do over and over and over again, even within the same process. So there's always additional work that needs to be done. There's always opportunities for improvement in your processes. So A3 is something that is really repeatable, but it is structured thinking. Those who go through what I call an A3 event, who have never been exposed to quality tools, are going to come away with a way of really thinking differently. And I have found that the participants never really think about a process the same after they come out of an A3 event, because it is very structured thinking. But it's also very transparent. There's no hidden agenda within an A3 problem-solving methodology. So the reason we do it in a one page is because we want it to be very transparent, very easy to follow, so that anyone coming to see how well the process improvement is going can see exactly where the team is and where they have been. It's data-driven thinking. We're going to use data to make very concrete decisions, not only at the beginning when we're building the problem statement, but also at the end to show the effectiveness of the actual changes that have been made. There's a lot of organizational learning that goes on. Again, only shared essential information is shared when we're putting it into this visual format. So we're going to get rid of a lot of the noise. There's no fluff here. There's no sugar coating. it's going to get down to the meat of what's going on within the organization. So that gives some learning, but also gives that transparency. We're aligning our thinking to the actions that are best, not just the actions that somebody wants to put in. We're really thinking about, from a strategic perspective, what is the organization striving to achieve, and how are we going to build upon that success? And finally, we're really looking at those results-driven thinking. As I mentioned, participants don't come out of an A3 session without changing the way they look at the organization. And oftentimes you'll see participants who have never been interested in or involved in process improvement or quality in other ways come to the table and continually think about their next problem statement. What else can we improve upon? Because the A3 methodology and tool gives a voice to the folks who are sitting at the tables doing the real work. It's not folks that are in the upper management that are making process decisions that aren't considering what's happening in the day-to-day operations. We're bringing in the subject matter experts to actually make this happen. So again, why do I use A3 and why do I recommend that you use A3? It's a much quicker problem-solving tool. We're really thinking through logical reasoning and application of a step-by-step approach to problem solving. We are demanding through this tool root cause identification. And for all of us who have been in the quality world for any number of years, we can tell you that getting to the true root cause of an issue will get rid of some of that bias that happens, that the kind of greasy wheel, and squeaky wheel. Because what happens when we build a problem statement is you will have those in the room that are saying, wait, but I always get these customer calls that are, it takes us 6 days to resolve because they're such complex issues. Well, when we really get in and dig into the data, those happen to be the calls that people remember, those complaints that people remember. But those types of complaints happen a lot less often than really is the perception is. So I'm going to stop and ask a question here. Are there places in your organization or even in your day-to-day work in which the problem that's being stated isn't actually the problem? That's just the thing that everybody remembers. What are some ways and places in which you've seen that? Anyone? Anybody have an example? Well, again, using data will help us eliminate those sort of louder voices on, but my issue is the biggest issue. So that's why we like to use a quick problem-solving methodology that demands that root cause and demands the data to prove whether an issue really is an issue or if it's just the thing that gets remembered most. Thanks to the application of objective and critical thinking, it's much easier to plan for an A3 event. So it doesn't take a ton of time. It's not as much data collection as, say, a green belt or a black belt program requires, but it's very vital data. So we're not just grabbing something and making things up. We are really getting to that critical data for a particular problem. And then we also use it as team develop, because we're using this as a repeatable, structured tool to find root causes. It can be used across all company levels. There's not a lot of background training that has to happen. Anyone can kind of jump in, and as long as you've got a facilitator who understands how to implement an A3 event and implement the A3 tool, you've got a lot of cross-department collaboration that's going to happen. You're going to have a lot of knowledge sharing. And again, it's something that is quick to bring to an organization, because your senior leaders are going to get a lot of great feedback, but it's also going to come quickly. So let's jump into the nuts and bolts of this visual tool. I'm going to first ask, has anybody used the A3 tool in their organization? All right. Got a few no's. Okay. Got one yes. I'm going to call on Jeff if he'll let me. How successful has it been within your organization?
So my current organization does not utilize the A3. I spent a year at another firm in 2022, and it was a tool that they had adopted. I liked it, but I'll be honest that this presentation is very insightful, just because I really didn't have a whole lot of the background behind the A3. And while I was at that other firm, I kind of thought it was just one of their inventions. So this is really interesting to me to see the presentation.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm glad. So, and that's what I hope you walk away with today is some good information, but even down to maybe even getting started and having an opportunity to facilitate an A3, because it's just such a powerful tool. So let's get into the nuts and bolts. So as I mentioned, it's a very visual tool. And if you Google A3 templates, you're going to come up with a number of them. This is the one that I use because I've simplified it a little bit over time, but there is no right or wrong answer. As long as the A3 template is rooted in the plan, do, check, act methodology, you're going to get to the right answer. So don't be overwhelmed or shy about trying different things. Maybe adding a couple of columns here and there, or a couple of sections that really will help customize this for your organization. But the first thing you want to start with any A3 is a project name. Okay, so let's talk about that. We're not talking about just a throwaway project name here, just throw something up here. We really want you to be intentional with this title, because we are setting the stage for this as a visual tool that you can post on the wall somewhere, that anybody can walk by and read and fully understand where the organization has been working. And so we want to think about something like, we want to decrease our customer complaints by a percentage. We are looking to improve our, order to cash cycle, those types of things. We really want to get something that is meaningful, that the lay person would understand. The next piece, that I didn't call it out as a highlight here, but the next piece is also important. Identifying who your champion is. So that's your senior leader that's going to be your champion. We want to make sure that our senior leaders are engaged with this. We can make improvements all day long, but if the senior leaders don't buy into it, going to struggle actually implementing particularly cross-functional areas and action items. I'm thinking of the IT type improvements that typically have to be made in any process improvement, even if it's just creating a new report. We need some type of IT programming involvement. Well, if we don't have a senior leader who is championing this, or a high enough level in the organization that is championing this project, it's going to be very difficult to get some of those other departments involved. We want a clear process owner here. So who owns, in this example, the customer complaint process? Sometimes you have to go digging for this answer. It's not uncommon for an organization to not have clear process owners. So particularly some organizations who are have kind of grown rapidly and everybody seems to be doing a little bit of everything. I call this tripping over each other. So if you don't have a clear process owner, it typically means that you have a lot of process owners, and that typically means people are tripping over each other trying to get the work done. So there's a lot of redundancy there. Sometimes you have to walk all the way back and start an A3 on that itself. A business leader and whomever is going to be your facilitator. And then finally, identifying the dates in which this project is going to run and the team members. I recommend a team of around 5 to 7, definitely no more than 10. Anything more than around 7, and you start to lose subject matter expertise. So make sure you're getting a team that are true subject matter experts, but you want to also make sure that you are working with somebody who can make decisions. So that might be the process owner who you're going to present this to. They might be able to make decisions. Maybe they don't want to be part of the team because they don't want to unduly influence the actions. But make sure you definitely have somebody who can make decisions on the action plans and help push the action plans through to the rest of the organization. But the team should be those people on the ground. We want to give the folks who are actually doing the work the loudest voice here. It's not uncommon for us to have a process in which the manager or the supervisor or even director of the process thinks they know what's going on within their process and can speak very fluently about the process. But when you actually go sit on the floor and you talk to the people who are doing the work, that's not at all how that process is being run. All right, so by a show of hands, either a thumbs up or a hand emoji, or even in the chat, how many of you guys have encountered a situation in which either you are doing the work differently than what your management thinks you're doing, you have encountered a process where the people are doing the work, or you're the manager of a process which you know the work, but your people are doing it a little bit differently? I'm getting some hands here. Anyone else? Yeah, this just isn't super uncommon to encounter this. And so this is where having a clear understanding of getting those clear subject matter experts in the room ready to talk about this process is going to be critical. We're not improving on a process that somebody thinks is happening. We're actually improving on the work that's happening on the floor. One thing that I would coach you as a facilitator is to make sure you're including the super positive go-getters. We're going to improve this and this is going to be fabulous people on the team, but you also want a couple of naysayers. You want folks who don't believe any change will ever happen. They're somewhat disgruntled with the process. Maybe they're doing a lot of workarounds because they don't agree with the actual standard operating procedure. You want to get those in the room too, because they have just as much influence on the deployment of new improvements as the happy go-getters. So they're going to be equally talking around the proverbial water cooler about how well things are going. So if you can get them in, you can move them from a detractor to an influencer very quickly, and that's our goal, particularly when we're ready to deploy the new changes. Okay. So we've got our project name that's going to kind of give us an idea of where we're going. What are we working on? We need to then begin with number one. Step one is identifying our current condition. And this is not only the problem statement, but I would highly recommend having some type of graphic here. And I know that Heather was just talking about data visualization. This is a great way to display some data that highlights the problem. So if you were with us for Heather's presentation, and she displayed the fictional data around TNCP applicants, and it showed that we had a sharp decline of applicants in the West, I believe, if I remember correctly, over the years. Maybe our problem statement is we need to increase our applicants from the west of Tennessee, the west area of Tennessee, and we need to do that by 10% this year. So when we are thinking about data visualization, this is going to be a great time in which we're going to show, okay, we're currently here, but our board, let's say, for example, our customer is saying we need to be here. And you can show this sort of gap between where you are and where you should be. It's a great way of getting folks' attention. But any way you visualize the data, make sure that it is fairly clearly defines here what the problem is. And again, this is a visual aid. So the more visual you can be with the problem statement and the current condition, the faster you're going to get folks' attention. Your second step, so we're all still in the plan phase of the Plan, Do, Check, Act. You want to identify, again, your target. Sometimes it's already defined in your project name. You're going to restate that here. But ultimately, we're identifying what is our measure of success. How do we know that we have hit the mark when we're done? What are we looking to achieve? So again, it could be reducing those customer complaints by 15%. And we're going to identify those data sources, okay? So we're going to look at how do you even know where your customer complaint data is coming from? So we're going to look at the call center statistics. So we're going to look specifically at the call center statistics. In the example of the number of TNCPE applicants, we're going to look in our applicant database. So we're going to measure that through our applicant database. Again, it's going to be ideal to show some type of graph here and then identify the data source for that graph. Can anybody tell me why it might be important to identify the data source? Any thoughts? I'll give you a sneak peek. As Heather mentioned, there's a lot of data floating around in a lot of organizations, and customer complaints might be defined in multiple ways across the organization. And as you guys are coming in, data integrity. So we're looking at where do we get this data from? How are we calculating this data so that there is no confusion on where the data came from? And absolutely, how are we going to use it again later? We want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples when we're looking at, have we actually improved upon this metric? So we want to make sure we're grabbing data that's valid, data that's been validated, data that everyone agrees is where the problem lies, and data that we can repeat over time and show improvements over time. In our final stage of the planning process, we are going to capture our root cause analysis. Does anybody have a favorite root cause analysis tool?
Jill, you have a hand raised?
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of root cause analysis tools out there. In fact, ASQ used to have a book. I'd have to go check the resource library. Used to have a book on root cause analysis and all the different methods that can be used for root cause analysis. I think the most common are the 5 whys and the Ishikawa or fishbone diagram. For me, I prefer, for this particular tool, I prefer the fishbone diagram. And here's why, or Ishikawa diagram, depending on how you actually define it. Here's why. The 5 whys can create some inherent bias, because your 5 whys, the bias starts at what your first question is. You know, why is this problem happening? And those subsequent questions. And it can be easy to kind of get to the 5th why and not explore some of the offshoots of those questions and answers. With the fishbone diagram, it gives us an opportunity to look at root cause in very specific categories. And if you're not familiar with the actual fishbone diagram tool, it's a quick Google search will show you the fishbone diagram tool, but it's literally, you know, kind of a problem statement in the middle with offshoots, bones, if you will, that have headers of topics. Things like, can policies and procedures be the issue? What under processes are causing the problems? What technology might be causing the problems? What people might be causing the problems? Materials, measurements, safety might be part of it. Compliance, regulatory compliance might be part of the issues. When you break it down by section like that and really get into root causes by kind of broad stroke headings, you get to root causes that might not naturally be thought of. It's not uncommon for that sort of squeaky wheel to become the root cause of a 5 why exercise. So the fishbone diagram really gets, as a facilitator, you get an opportunity to think, okay, well, tell me what technology might be causing some of the issues. Where might some of the workforce issues? Do we have the right competencies? Do we have the right capacity? All of those things. So thinking through that, you're going to, again, visually display your diagram, whatever your root cause tool was, and the questions and the answers, whether it was through a fishbone diagram or through a 5 why or any number of other root cause analysis tools that might be familiar to your organization. This will be a great place to kind of visually prepare that. Now, I'm not advocating every single detail go out, but definitely your broad strokes and some of the conclusions that you have drawn as being true root cause that you want to address. All right, I'm going to stop real quick and ask if there are any questions so far.
I don't see
Okay.
any in the chat.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Say that again.
I don't see any in the chat. So
I don't either. Okay, so that successfully gets us through the plan phase of our A3 tool. Let's jump into the do phase. Now, it only has one box here, but that doesn't mean that it is minor in consideration. This is where the rubber meets the road. Okay, so now we've identified the actual problem, where our gaps are, what our target conditions should be, what our root cause analysis is, where the actual, the meat of the bones of the issues exist. Now we need to figure out how to fix it. So you're going to go through an exercise in which you're going to identify and brainstorm improvements. I typically look for who my audience is. So if my audience seems to be very quiet so far, I tend to do kind of a silent writing exercise where I have folks I write the big root causes that we've agreed upon that we want to address. And I put those on, as a title. And then I literally hand Post-it notes out, and I have them write how they would, each individual improvement that they would do across anything that they can think of, and no idea is stupid. We want the mundane to the far-fetched is what we're looking for during this brainstorming exercise. And then you kind of put those all together and you begin to identify not only patterns of which process improvement ideas seem to kind of be cropping up most, but there are always going to be some zingers that only one person thought of and everybody is like, wow, that sort of seems to be a no-brainer and none of us came up with it. And so we want to definitely give credit for that. If you have a group that all works really well together and you don't feel like anybody's personality is going to keep them from saying something, and you can just do a true brainstorming exercise where you can just start writing a whole bunch of stuff down and documenting those pieces. It is okay here to address those complex problems iteratively. You don't have to have every solution known right now. Often you're going to have, here's sort of my low-hanging fruit that I need to address now. And if I get an opportunity, I want to come back and I want to do this sort of interim group of problems improvements, and then these are my really complex ones and I want to address these as we move forward. It's also not uncommon for an A3 to bear other A3s, particularly as you're trying to keep your scope very defined in your problem statement. Other things are going to crop up in the discussion that you're going to, as a facilitator, I literally put on a parking lot and say, that's a great idea. That's something we need to address in another improvement session. That doesn't fit within the box that we are in right now, this particular problem statement, but I don't want to lose track of it. So keeping that parking lot. The other thing, you might not have every improvement that you can do now. Go ahead and put all those other things on a parking lot so that they are at least considered for future improvements. Once you've documented those potential things that you want to address now, I suggest going through some type of prioritization. And I typically use a benefit and effort matrix in which we're identifying, this is sort of easy to do and, doesn't take a lot of effort. It's a very quick hit all the way through. This is very complex and hard to do, and we're not going to get a lot of benefit out of it. So if we're thinking about, sort of a benefit and effort, how much time and energy and is this particular improvement idea going to take to implement versus the benefit you're going to gain from it? I will tell you a secret. In the organizations in which I do this in, I tend to say that anything that requires any type of IT programming beyond just kind of maybe creating a new report, but anything that requires database updates or capturing brand new information that hasn't been caught before, updating workflows, that takes that IT involvement, I typically say is a high effort, primarily because IT work is bigger than just this one improvement. There's a lot of things that are going on in an IT world, and we want to make sure we have to get on their list and get prioritized on their list. So I try to work through improvements that I try to consider improvements that don't take any or a lot of IT time and effort. If it's something, again, kind of quick, then I'll consider that a low effort. But anything that requires significant IT time, I tend to just go ahead and move it across the scale as high effort. That's just a little insider trick that I do. Once we've identified those and we've prioritized them on, these are the ones that we're going to address because they are high benefit and low effort, or maybe they are, high benefit, high effort, but we have to address it because it's a compliance issue that we're not meeting. All of those things are going to show up here, and we're going to just note them here again visually, and we're going to document what some of those benefits are. If we're thinking about somebody just kind of walking past a big poster board of this A3 project, we want them to see the benefits that they're going to get from these improvements. And then we're going to actually project plan them. Who's in charge of making it happen? When does it need to happen? Who's approving it? Is that the project champion? Is that the process owner? Is that another senior leader that approves that their department's going to be involved? And then finally, we're going to keep updating that status until everything is complete. We're then going to move into the check portion, where we're going to be continually updating our results until all of those improvements are complete. So until that status on all of those improvements say complete, we're going to keep updating this particular section. And again, this is going to be a graph, something that kind of proves that these problems are getting better with the improvements. Once everything is complete, you're going to put a final graph here to show that we went from point A to point F in our improvements after everything has been done. And then finally, we're going to get into some of those follow-up actions. So consider rechecking the benefits over time. Consider consider checking adherence to the new process, those types of things. One question that's come up, is there a recommended min-max for improvements? It really depends on your organization. Again, you could have as many as 10 improvements that are very quick to do, almost stroke of the pen. Yes, you can stop filling out this field that's going to come in. Sometimes you're going to have one improvement, and that's going to kind of solve, that 20 20% of your, that's that one big thing that's going to solve 80% of your problems. So there's really not a min max as far as should you only have one or should you have no more than 10. I would definitely not recommend if you have a lot of low effort, high benefits improvements, I would definitely prioritize those over something, unless again it's a regulatory requirement, over something that's very high effort but also high benefits. I kind of get that low hanging fruit out of the way first. I try to keep everything within a 30-day time frame because again, this is about quick hits. So what can we get done within a 30-day time frame? So that's usually my sort of litmus test of, do we have too many improvements or too few? So you're going to have those follow-up actions. Again, you're going to have clear owners of that. A tip for the road, there should be one owner for each of these, both the improvements as well as the follow-up actions. When you start getting multiple owners, you're going to end up, well, I thought they were doing it and I thought they were doing it, and oh, I'm waiting on them to do one piece while I have this other piece. So try to get one very clear owner, even if you have to go sort of higher up the organizational chart to get to that one clear owner. This needs to have very clear due dates and status of those due dates. And ultimately, we are going to kind of show that we are monitoring the improvements. And that's where I suggest implementing some type of periodic check that these improvements are still in place, because it's difficult for a team to have gone through this and get excited about these improvements, and you deploy it to your team, and 30 days later, after the excitement is sort of worn off, the people sort of backslide into the way they've always done it. So we want to make sure we have some sort of pulse going forward on, are these improvements staying within the actual process? And again, maybe that's just a continual look at the data to show that yes, we're still minimizing our customer complaints. Okay, well, that's the tool in a nutshell. Do you have any questions on this specific tool? Anything that I have demonstrated or talked about on this tool? Okay, well, I'm going to thank our good friend Duke, who's on the call with us today. He shared with me a really fun example of an A3 that he's done in the past, and this is the problem statement is, the idea of we're very stressed. All of us are very stressed. We don't know how to chill out. And we really want to improve upon that in our own lives. And so you can see here, he identified the root cause analysis. He used the fishbone diagram. Thinking about what's happening within both the body, the mind, the emotions, and the world that might be creating this stress. And the idea that when we get into plan, the target is less suffering. When we get into the plan, here are all the things that we're going to work on. We're going to study, we're going to meditate. We're going to check ourselves. We're going to look at how much wasted effort we have. Are our relationships better? And then finally, we're going to, in the future, we're going to kind of compare our current method to the idea of and philosophy of Stoicism. So this is kind of a fun way of demonstrating how this tool might be completed. Uh, John Simpson, do you want to share kind of what you're talking about with the Honda supplier and what the motivation behind using the A3 was?
Honda felt that it was, we used the 8D problem solving method for most of our customers, but Honda thought that the A3 gave them more information and really proved that it was that the problem had been taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that it was just a really easy way of communicating with them? It gave you something to communicate.
Yeah, that's really when we presented, usually we would be doing like a virtual with Honda engineers, and they would, that's what they wanted to see. And then they wanted to see any backup documentation.
That's great. That's great. And that's exactly the point, right? It's whomever you are presenting this to, whether it's senior leadership or to to other folks, customers, suppliers outside of the organization, you're giving them a chance to see what's happening within. It's that transparency, but you're also giving them a very solid feeling that everything is going well. There's the people who have received the presentation get this comfort level that the team really has been thinking about this and working hard on it. Thank you for that. Jeffrey shares a question. In the act phase, if you're doing an audit of the process and it proves that the actions were ineffective, is it time for another A3? The answer is it could be. I would probably consider first pulling the team back together and asking questions around deployment first. Have the actions actually been completed the way we thought they were, and has the workforce actually implemented those in the way we described them to be implemented in the improvements? I would also maybe, if you end up doing another A3, I would start with a background of this is where we were, but we didn't get to where we needed to be, so that you can look at the root cause. Perhaps you didn't actually get far enough down in the root cause, and that might be what a new team would need to come in and do. Maybe you didn't have the right subject matter experts in the room. Good question. I think we just have just a couple of minutes here, and I am going to kind of give you some tips for the road on how to get started. Again, assemble that team of 5 to 8 subject matter experts. I wouldn't go any fewer than 5, but 10's probably starting to get too many. So kind of keep it somewhere in that 5 to 8 range, so you get some clear understanding of the process itself, but make sure you have someone either specifically on the team or involved in the improvement as a process owner or a champion to actually be there to make those decisions. Get that problem statement very clear up front. You do not need scope creep here. The more scope creep you have, the longer and the less effective the actual problems become. I recommend setting aside a 5-day stretch in which you pull everybody into a room and eliminate their distractions. This is where I sort of marry the idea of a Kaizen event into the A3 methodology. Gives you an opportunity to get some very concentrated effort, and it actually reduces the amount of time you're going to be working on this, because you don't have that ramp up time every time you get back into the meeting. If say you're meeting once a week on this problem statement, there's some ramp up time. Okay, 10 minutes of, okay, last time we talked about this is where we are, this is where we're going. Does everybody remember what this means? If you can get them all into a room and kind of, I like to call it locked into a room doing nothing but A3, you avoid some of that that ramp up time, which extends out the amount of time it takes to get to the actual improvements. And get very, very clear data for your problem statement. Know where that data is coming from, make sure it's valid, make sure everybody agrees that it's the right data for the problem statement you're trying to work on. Okay, I got about 5 minutes left on the clock. I don't want to take up all of your time. If you've got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but this is also my direct contact information. I love to talk all things quality tools, and all things Baldrige. So please consider me as part of your network when you have questions. And if you need any help with A3, give me a call. I can help you out.